Welcome back to Podcast Pediatricians and podcastpediatricians.com. I'm Rob Walter.
And I'm Matt Gotthold.
And this is our third and final episode on sleep.
At least for the time being.
Yes. But before we forget, if you want CME credit for listening to this podcast, you're out of luck.
SOL.
You will not get that here, not for the foreseeable future. But so
don't people who espouse to be able to translate these things into CME have to know what they're talking about?
Yeah, really. I don't know if we make that. So this episode is on teen sleep. I love taking care of teenagers. I take care of kids up to around 22 or 23, which gets most of them through college if they go that route. How about you?
Yeah, I will go. I'll usually tell them I'm happy to take care of them through college. I had somebody call me the other day. I think they're 26 now. They've been out in the business world for a little while and asked if I could diagnose their ADD.
Right. And you're like, they come in, you're like, dude, you need to get into the adult world. It's like that episode of Friends with Ross,
right?
Who's in his late 20s picking up moms in the waiting room.
Yeah. Once you have your own 401k, I think that kind of negates you from our practice.
You got to move on. Although it's flattering, I do hear that they get just a nicer feel from their pediatric office than some of the adult offices.
Yeah.
First, before we get into sleep, we're going to talk about a few pediatric studies in the news. Last episode, we were both on call. We were a bit sleep deprived and a bit cranky. We tried to hide that, but we were really cranky. And we know that when that happens over our careers and you're really tired, you can never use that as an excuse to give excellent care. And you can never, ever be rude to parents, even though it can be kind of tempting at 3 a.m. when they call about chronic constipation, the kid's sleeping. Have you got some of those?
What was the wackiest call? Well, one of the wackiest calls that you ever got, like that woke you up and you thought to yourself, "Oh my."
Well,
that's not appropriate.
We'll probably talk about that in our next episode on poop, but it was the middle of the night phone call. I think my child may have eaten a little poop. And that was like, it's 3 a.m.
I got a call from an OBGYN once who was afraid that her daughter ate cat poop.
There we go. There's a theme here.
Yeah.
Or we're just weirdly remembering those
I got a call
episodes.
once at 3 a.m. and the question after the parent hemmed and hawed a bit was they wanted to know what that round Band-Aid was on their child's heel. And I usually am very accommodating to parents when they call me in the middle of the night. I figure they must be scared. But I had to ask, what was it that at 3 o'clock in the morning compelled you to call me about a Band-Aid on your child's heel? And they said they were just really not able to sleep until they found out what it was.
And so you shouldn't sleep either. Your doctor shouldn't sleep either.
Oh, my goodness.
So it is hard. Sometimes we know that the parents themselves are anxious and often they're sleep deprived, and that rude pediatric caregivers do not inspire trust in their families and then will not promote good health in their patients, or that matter, be successful in their business if they're rude. I am biased, but again, I do think that the pediatric world on average is just a lot nicer than the adult medicine world. And
also we're bigger patsies.
and yes, and I did a few years of adult radiology training, and although I met brilliant people, it just, when you got back to peds, it's like, these are just nicer people.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry for you adult medicine people who are listening to this. But while it's well documented that rude doctors who fail to listen to and respect their patients often lead to suboptimal care, researchers in Israel recently published a study showing that when parents are rude to their pediatric caregivers, it often leads to worse care, which may be harmful or worse for their own children. The study was published in the January edition of Pediatrics 2017 by Dr. Eric Riskin and Peter Bamberger et al. And was excerpted in the Live News today. So this study had 39 different neonatal intensive care unit, or NICU, teams that were comprised of 2 doctors and 2 nurses, and they simulated 5 emergency scenarios for extremely ill babies, while an actress playing the baby's mother rudely scolded each of the subject teams, but not the control teams. Now, they used a simulated rude mother. I guess they decided not to use a simulated rude father in this study. Although I think, thinking back, I remember more of the rude fathers than mothers, not to be sexist, but...
You think?
I think so.
They're rude in a different way. It's kind of like an underlying threatening rude.
Right. Again, not often. You're right. Never to Dr. Matt. So the teams that were rudely scolded by a mom were deficient in all 11 measurements of performance, including diagnostic accuracy, compared to the control group that were not rudely scolded.
Wow.
And this poor performance lasted the entire day.
Jeez.
Plus, those caregivers had no idea that their performance had suffered at all. This follows a 2015 article from the same group that showed that being rude to your fellow pediatric caregivers also increases errors. We all remember in training sometimes getting belittled by supervisors.
Hey, listen, I'm surprised those neonatal intensive care unit nurses didn't chew that mom up and spit her out, because they go from cuddly to vicious pretty quickly.
Although they're wonderful and they give great care.
We
love nurses. So, and did I belittle you during your residency, Matt? Come on, you can be honest now.
It's
I don't
a
remember.
void in my brain. I've had to disassociate. Is that the right word? Disassociate myself from it?
I think I just ignored you throughout your residency. So while this rudeness effect, this negative rudeness effect on performance is not solely seen in medicine, there's been studies showing the same thing in the business world and in the academic teaching world. The implications in medicine are enormous. As a recent Hopkins study estimated that there are over 250,000 deaths a year in the United States attributed to medical errors. That's the third leading cause of death in the United States. So be nice to your patients, be nice to your colleagues, and also be nice to your pediatric caregivers. Your loved ones' lives may depend on it.
Nice.
Okay, our second study comes from JAMA Pediatrics in February 2017. In this study, a Dr. Zhu, I think it's XU, I'm pronouncing it Zhu, et al. For Northwestern University, the 2016 Pinstripe Bowl champions. We beat Pitt, Pitt beat Clemson, the national champions. You do the math. Okay, so this fascinating
gosh.
I had to say that. I went to the Pinstripe Bowl.
Because everybody's afraid of Willie the Wildcat.
I was there for all 34 straight losses in the 80s, the longest losing streak in the history of college football, so I can say what I want about it now that we win.
When a team breaks a losing streak, is that disappointing because they held some type of a record?
No, but we did multiple times throw the goalposts into the lake. And one time my picture doing it was on the front page of the
like
paper.
When something goes wrong in a city and you light fire to your own car?
No, it's not. No, it's not. I didn't have to pay for it, I don't think. So anyway, So this fascinating study from Northwestern suggests that daily full-body moisturization of babies who are high risk for developing eczema, starting from a few weeks of life until about 6 months of age, can markedly decrease the incidence of that baby later developing eczema. And it builds on similar studies in the United States and the UK also showing prevention of eczema. Now, while more long-term studies on this are underway, we in pediatrics are all about prevention. Up to 20% of kids have eczema, and for some kids, it's really severe and life-changing and literally torture with chronic infections and sleep issues. As they say, eczema is the itch that rashes. It also costs the health system as much as $3.8 billion a year. In the study, they used 7 different moisturizers, all with success, including Aveeno, Aquaphor, Cetaphil, and Vaseline petroleum jelly. The press releases of the study really played up the petroleum jelly part because it's the cheapest, so it was the most cost-effective. But I certainly can understand if a parent doesn't want to put petroleum byproducts on their baby every day for the first 6 months. So this other moisturizer is still pretty cheap, especially if you're going to use it for 6 months every day. You might as well buy it in bulk at a place like Costco. I can think of multiple families in my practice who have siblings with severe eczema and the parents have severe eczema that this would be something that I would think about trying. How about you, Matt?
No, it makes sense. I think that a lot of this goes to consistency. Certainly in the future, we will have podcasts that talk about skincare, including eczema, and we'll kind of reveal some of ours and others' pearls at that time. But for right now, let me leave you with at least something that I learned.
It's going to be bleach.
Bleach!
So I talk about, all Matt talks about is bleach.
Oh, I love a bleach bath. So first of all, as a provider, part of the trick of insinuating this into a conversation is to do it the right way. So you don't want to come right out as a provider and say, let's use some bleach on your baby. That really doesn't square well with parents. Instead, I start to talk a little bit about some research that was done. And this was really beautifully discussed by Dr. Loy out at also Northwestern. Rob, another point for you.
Go Cats!
On a pediatric audio digest, and I believe it was 2015. And what he had discussed was the fact that there is good research now that shows that the Staphylococcus on a routine person's skin produces byproducts that are oftentimes a source of inflammation, particularly in people who have eczema. And so if one can limit these bacteria, these staph, then oftentimes the eczema will improve dramatically. And so I have definitely been recommending this to my patients. I will usually talk about it by saying something along the lines of, hey, listen, if we use a little bit of just very diluted common bleach in the bath, which by the way is less bleach than is in a swimming pool, then you may well see miraculous improvement in your child's skin. And indeed, I've seen it multiple times now. So the recipe, just real quickly, is anywhere from a quarter cup to a half a cup of bleach in a regular sized bathtub. I'll usually tell folks a quarter cup for half a tub, a half a cup for a full tub. And at least initially, what Dr. Loy recommends is doing this every day for a week during kind of an induction period, and then twice a week thereafter. And again, I've just seen tremendous success with this with my patients. Just to legitimize myself, oftentimes I will give them a PDF that has the name of a children's hospital written across the top of it, along with instructions, because some of the children's hospitals have these instructions written. The one that I'm thinking of right off the top of my head is Seattle Children's, has an entire PDF that's downloadable on dilute bleach baths for atopic dermatitis.
And I have to say, Matt kept talking about this so much inappropriately at times that I did start to use it for some of my patients with severe eczema, and it's a tough sell sometimes, but every single one that's got back to me says it really helped.
I wish I invented it, but let's give credit where credit's due.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. We'll be right back. We're back and are continue to plug products that have no idea that we support them and may not care, but we're having fun doing it. So I've been plugging...
The lawsuits could be flying
I've been
in coming months.
Plugging some fruits and vegetables, and I went out to SF last weekend. I don't know about you, Matt, but I don't know when it went from San Fran to SF, but...
It never did for me.
Well, everybody says SF, or at least in my kids' generation. So anyway, I went out to SF, and as much as great food out there, great dim sum in Chinatown, to me, it's all about the chocolate. And while we have Hershey and Hershey World close to us here, I guess part of it's being on vacation, but there's nothing like eating chocolate out in SF. So of course, there's Ghirardelli's, and I actually went by there and tried two new ones. They had a dark chocolate blueberry. Ooh. And a pumpkin spice caramel chocolate.
We have espoused our love for blueberries on this
we have,
podcast.
And now blueberry chocolate. It's
indeed.
Absolutely. And those are really good. But for me, chocolate San Francisco, it's all about See's candy. See's is the bomb. And especially...
See's like a C?
S-E-E, apostrophe S. And I have the truffles right here. I brought for you, and we're each going to, and it's like an inappropriate time of the day to eat it, but we're each going to have a truffle. I have no idea which is which. There's no bad ones. There's none of those like cherry weird ones that you eat and like,
You try to pawn off on your younger brother?
Yeah. I don't have a younger brother, but my sister.
I do.
You ever do that when you're going to a patient's room? You go into your patient's room and you just had a piece of chocolate and you start talking and you start salivating. And not only are you drooling, but it's like brown drool coming out of your mouth.
What's that Mel Brooks movie where they carried around the spit thing?
Spittoon.
No, Spit Boy. Spit Boy.
Yeah, no. Mm-hmm. I don't carry that around.
History of the World, I think that was.
All right, so my plug is for See's candy, made in the United States of America. How about you, Matt?
I'd rather talk about, actually, pardon me, I'm chewing. Rather talk about songs with candy in them. Can you think of any?
Oh, Sammy Davis, the Candy Man.
Okay, that's a good one. Although
The
arguably
best
done
one.
better by the guy in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. The first one, the only one.
Yeah, I don't need. I ignore the
Johnny
second
Depp
one.
was just
even before Johnny Depp's
demented.
recent awfulness. Did not watch that movie because the first one.
Well, let me see here. My favorite Candy song is probably a Bruce song. Candy's Room. In Candy's Room, there are pictures of heroes on the wall. To get to Candy's Room, you gotta walk the darkness.
Bruce Willis made a song.
He
Wow.
actually did, but not the Bruce I'm talking about. Darkness on the Edge of Town, Candy's Room. And then
Okay,
there was the
let's-
Cars, Candy-O.
Oh.
Candy-O, I need you. I forget the rest of the lyrics.
All right, all right, Matt. Do you have a plug? Do you have a product?
Yeah.
You wanna plug?
Yes. I forgot. Let me circle back around. I got a little music held out there. I am a huge fan, and it embarrasses the heck out of my family. A huge fan of Crocs, and my particularly favorite color is red Crocs. Not shorting Mario Batali or anybody else out there who's a Croc aficionado, but years ago, when I was going hiking with my cousins, one of them recommended, because it was my first big hike, that we have some Crocs for the end of the day that I could wear to kind of rest those tired dogs. I asked my wife to please pick up a pair for me at the local outlet, and it ended up being they ended up being bright red. And initially, I was a bit put off, but then I embraced them as my own. And now I wear my bright red Crocs really on any occasion I can find, much to the embarrassment and dismay of my children.
Yes, and even during these podcasts, it's quite off-putting. I heard that the sales of Crocs have gone way down the past couple weeks now that the Ringling Brothers Circus is going out of business, and
But
they've
after this
lost,
podcast, they're going to skyrocket.
do you also wear Uggs? That's my question.
Oh, no.
Okay, I figure Croc and Uggs. So
No,
all right,
completely different products.
I cannot endorse the whole Croc bandwagon
I have to get you
on that one.
bandwagon.
We'll be right back.
Okay, so we're back, and we just wanted to once again review our disclaimer, which is we're sharing our own personal opinions on pediatric care. Always talk to your own pediatric caregiver about your child. Pediatric caregivers should always consult expert guidelines and consider their own community standards of care. And again, there's
And
no,
now we're Crocs.
there's nice. There is no CME involved with this program. Sleep's everything, and lack of it affects and increases the risk and severity of all kinds of pediatric maladies. So there are essentially three distinct states of being. Number one, the wakeful state. Number two, the non-REM sleep, also known as NREM. And number three, the REM sleep, which is also kind of colloquially known as dream sleep. These states have distinctive features on EEG, and they also have distinctive eye movements and muscle tone aspects to them. Non-REM sleep is perceived as being a period of low brain activity during which the regulatory capacity of the brain continues to be active and in which body movements are preserved. New research suggests that in this stage, the sleeping brain is still able to process external information and, to a degree, assess its importance. The parasympathetic nervous system dominates, and the respiratory and cardiovascular parameters are regular. After about 6 months of age, the non-REM sleep becomes further divided into several subparts. There's stage 1, which is essentially the sleep-awake transition. This lasts 30 seconds to 5 minutes or so. In this, there are some brief involuntary muscle contractions, which we kind of know as myoclonic or hypnic jerks. I'm not sure if there's a difference between the two, both of which in most cases are considered to be normal phenomenon.
You get that, Matt? Like that little jerk, about to fall asleep, and then
Oh, yeah, man. Stage 2, N2, is usually considered to be the initiation of real sleep or true sleep. And this has all kinds of different findings on EEG compared to stage 1. And this stage lasts from 5 to 25 minutes or so. And then there's stage 3, and this is known as deep sleep or slow wave sleep or delta sleep. This stage of sleep is dominated by delta waves, and these have high voltage and low frequency activities. This is when respiration is the slowest and the most regular, and the parasympathetic activity is high. So it's really a very deep sleep. And this is really the sleep that is the most difficult to awaken someone from.
And this is the one where the beeper goes off.
Oh,
and when it goes off during that stage, I mean, I'm just wrecked for the next day.
Geez, yeah. The initial slow wave sleep period is about 30 to 45 minutes, and this is followed by a brief arousal, and then one transitions into a wakefulness or a lighter sleep. So REM sleep is where kind of everybody thinks the action is. REM sleep is characterized by having the highest brain metabolic rate, by dreaming, by an absence of skeletal muscle tone, except for the diaphragm, middle ear, and erectile muscles, lack of normal thermoregulation, and episodic bursts of phasic eye movements that are the hallmark of REM sleep. REM sleep is termed active sleep, and it's characterized by frequent muscle twitches and grimaces. These things often are a concern to new parents. Non-REM sleep and REM sleep alternate through the night in cycles of 50 minutes in infancy and gradually lengthen to adult levels of 90 to 110 minutes by the time a person is school-aged. Brief arousal, usually followed by a rapid return to sleep, often occurs at the end of each sleep cycle, which occur 4 to 6 times a night. This pattern of normal sleep arousal plays an important role as the source of problematic night wakenings in infancy and childhood, as we discussed in one of our first episodes. The relative proportion of REM and non-REM sleep per cycle changes as the night progresses. REM sleep percentage increases and slow wave sleep percentage declines over the course of the night. Slow wave sleep predominates in the first third of the night and REM sleep in the last third. The potential clinical significance of this timing of sleep stages is important. Most parasomnias, like night terrors or sleepwalking, occur in the first part of the night in non-REM sleep. The amount of REM sleep is selectively compromised with forced early morning waking for a parent's work schedule or daycare in younger children, and in the case of an adolescent who has to wake up for an early school start time.
Okay, so jumping to teen sleep. With puberty, a teen's circadian rhythm shifts to later, so they often can't fall asleep till 10 or even 11 o'clock. It's counterproductive for the parents to force their child to go to bed at 8:30 or 9 o'clock if they're just not tired. So they should go to bed a little bit later, but not extremely so. There are some teens who don't finish their homework until 11 o'clock, even midnight, and figuring out if this teen is just being inefficient or has learning or processing issues, or more often just getting way too much homework can be tough. But it is key when talking about teens and sleep to get a really, really detailed history of exactly when they go to bed on school days and when they go to bed on weekends and holidays, as well as when they wake up on school days and when they wake up on weekends and holidays. I want specific bedtimes and awake times for all those days, and I want to do it when the parents are in the room for that part, because the teens often will give you a story that they go to bed at a reasonable time and get up, and if the parents in the room, they'll just look and say, "That's ridiculous. That's not true at all. That's just bull donkeys." I had a different word, but we're not going to swear on this podcast. So I don't know if you find that, but the teens will tell you something, and then the parents will go, "That's not true at all about their sleep."
Or you can wait till there's a time when you actually have the teen alone and kind of pin them down, because oftentimes parents go to bed before their children do, and the parents really aren't aware of what goes on after, say, 11 o'clock or so.
Absolutely.
Goes both ways.
A typical high school scenario student that I see is that they're going to bed at midnight or 1 a.m., and they're getting up at 6 or 6:30 in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
And then on Saturday and Sunday morning, they're staying up until noon or 1 or 2 or later. In the morning, sometimes they're playing, again, most of the guys are playing multiplayer online internet games into the wee hours of the night. And then they sleep in till noon or 1 to do their catch-up on their sleep. So this means that these teens on Sunday night are not very tired. They just got up at noon or 1. And then Monday morning, when they get up at 6:15 a.m., they're dead boy walking or dead girl walking. And this leads to what Dr. Judith Owens, the sleep guru from Boston Children's we mentioned last episode, has coined social jet lag. It's the equivalent of every teenager flying cross-country from California to New York every Sunday night. Now, teens need at least 8 or 9 hours of sleep. But 40% of 10th graders and over 50% of 12th graders get less than 6 hours a night. This sleep deprivation raises the rates of obesity, depression, suicidality, car crashes, and teen drug use, and all other risk-taking behaviors. So while their thinking and reaction time gets more muddled, at the same time their impulsivity increases. So stupider, unsteadier, and more impulsive, a real recipe for trouble.
Yeah, and as you had mentioned before, Rob, really a lot of the bulk of what we can work through is the history. Once again, taking a good history is really the essence of so much that we do in pediatrics and in medicine in general, and really trying to pin a family down on what the particulars of a child's sleep habits are really can be a great benefit in terms of us trying to help them.
Yeah, it goes back to those medical school days, but it's all the history, and we all rolled our eyes. And
yeah, it surely is
true.
Yeah, and this unfortunately gets overlooked so frequently.
And then with everything else and EMR and such, we are just so short on time. That's the art, is trying to get all those good history in when you have a very limited amount of time with a teen who's sitting there with their eyes down looking at their phone. Mm-hmm. So we're focusing on teen sleep, but certainly this is an adult problem. And the cost of sleep deprivation worldwide, if you just looked at it in the economic cost, is astounding. Billions and billions of dollars. So given the natural shift in teen circadian sleep rhythms, school for teens, middle school, high school, junior high school, and high school should never start before 8:30 in the morning. And that's exactly what the American Academy of Pediatrics, or AAP, recommended starting in 2014. Where this has been done in Kentucky and in Virginia, the teens' grades have gone up, their dropout rates have gone down, they've been happier, and there's been less car crashes. But there's barriers to changing, and the barrier is often money, direct and indirect costs of changing routines like bus schedules, after-school childcare, and the biggie in high school, sports, athletics, and other after-school programs, especially in places when it gets really dark early in the winter. Sadly, only about 20% of middle school and high schools in the United States have shifted to later start times.
Yeah, this is a huge public health issue that really hasn't been addressed by our legislatures, by our educators. The fact that a lot of the children now are not just starting school very early compared to where they're most optimal, but also a lot of the scheduling that's going on in schools is referred to as block scheduling. So they're taking a good hour and a half per class. Combine that with a child who's already exhausted first thing in the morning, and there's just so much lost opportunity there in terms of education, which maybe, again, we'll touch on in a future podcast.
It's a tough nut to crack because our education system is based locally. And there's great reasons for that, but it's just harder to do something across state line and try to have a national standard when there's so much individual local input.
And the high school sports thing is it's another whole topic altogether. But
we'll talk about that.
Oh my goodness, having two children who went through high school sports and were very involved with it, that itself is just such a time occupying you said we weren't cussing, time occupying aspect of their lives and our lives as parents, that shifting that around even with respect to their education becomes a really challenging prospect.
And both of us really support high school sports athletics, but as I said, it takes a lot of time and it's tough for the kids to balance it, but it's wonderful for those interested to be involved in high school sports. Getting back to ways to address sleep issues in a busy well visit with teens, I stress over and over that he can't go to bed so late in the weekends, and even if they do, they shouldn't sleep in later than about 10 o'clock in the morning, because while they think they're making up for lost sleep, again, they're shifting their internal sleep clock. Plus, teens should never routinely take naps. That's for grandpa, and it's not healthy for a healthy teen. I sometimes specifically reference the Seinfeld routine that all of us are really a combination of a morning Jerry and a night Jerry. So morning Jerry wakes up exhausted like the teens and promises to go to bed early that night. And then night Jerry stays up late again. Morning Jerry hates night Jerry, and night Jerry could not care less about morning Jerry. And over the years, the kids look at me and like, what's Seinfeld? which is sad.
What Seinfeld?
So here's my 6 teen sleep commandments. And I'm not going to sing about this. Matt didn't get it last time. So my 6 teen sleep commandments. Number 1, smartphones should never, ever stay in their bedroom overnight. They can charge it on the kitchen table. And when the teen immediately responds that their smartphone is their alarm clock, I just tell mom to go to Five Below and buy an alarm clock. But better not to even have a clock in the room sometimes if they have insomnia. I get some great angry looks from the teens when I insist that there be no phone in their room overnight. Number 2, no screens for about an hour before the teen goes to bed. This can be tough, especially with homework, and sometimes there's exceptions, but that screen light just makes it difficult to get to sleep. And most of the time, they're on Snapchat or Instagram while they're doing homework. I used to say they're on Facebook, but apparently Facebook is just for old fogies now. And even if they're going to read before they go to bed, I always try to tell them to try to read in a sitting up position and not laying flat like they would sleeping, because that also can make it difficult to finally fall asleep. Number 3, no sleeping past 10 a.m. on weekends and holidays, as I mentioned. Also, after long summer or holiday breaks, you need to start to gradually get your teen up earlier and earlier, at least a week in advance, to acclimate them to the approximate time they're going to need to get up for school.
I have a family in my practice who has brilliantly figured this out for when school starts at the end of a summer. They'll take their children camping the last week before school starts. And I don't know how much camping you've done, Rob, but when you go to bed at the end of a day and camping, there is nothing to do. It's completely boring, and you tend to get a relatively solid sleep, and then you wake up more or less at the crack of dawn. Very difficult to sleep in when you're camping, and these folks use that and orient their kids right into the school year that way.
That is brilliant. Are there showers, or are there hot showers? I mean, if there's hot showers, I can do it in the morning, but really, otherwise, it's just, I need a shower. All right, number 4.
Yes, you do.
I'm a Long Island kid who needs a shower in the morning. Number 4, no sleepovers for some kids who just cannot handle sleep deprivation very well. For example, those with ADHD. For many of them, sleepovers during the school year just does not make any sense. They just can't get through it. And a lot of times the parents say that, and they know that when they have that sleepover, it's really difficult for them to recover. And I think that we want kids to be social, but there are certain kids that should not be routinely having sleepovers, because even if they say they get a lot of sleep on their sleepovers, they do not get any sleep on their sleepovers, or not much. Number 5, unplug the router sometimes. Yes, you should set screen limits for your kids. And in an ideal world, when you tell your teen not to use the internet past a certain time, that will be that. However, often it's a nightly battle of internet use. And as Matt mentioned, many of the parents will be going to bed before their teens. Yes, there's all kinds of programs out there limiting internet access, but honestly, most teens are way better than their parents on the computer and can get around almost any program. But it's hard for them to get around a lack of hardware. The router is usually that vertical thing in all houses with Wi-Fi, and you can just unplug it, and so no one can use the Wi-Fi, not even dad. I tell the parents to bring the router into bed with them if need be. Now, this whole unplugging the router discussion in the office really causes some great angry and sometimes terrified looks from teens. In my experience, just the threat of unplugging the router solves the problem before the parents actually have to do it. Have you tried that, Matt?
I've not, actually. This sounds brilliant. And teenagers, I think, are for the most part quite aware of their data and how much they're using. And so for them to go off the router and dip into their magical data bag is going to really put them off. And so this may indeed be a good solution for a lot of families.
It's worth trying. So the last one, number 6, limit caffeine in teens. Caffeine is the number 1 drug in the world. It may be legal, but it's still a drug, and you can get dependent on it, and you can get withdrawal from stopping it. It's astounding to me that they sell coffee in many high schools for students, not to mention the rising use of energy drinks like Red Bull, which is even more scary when it's mixed with other drugs like alcohol, which we surely will touch on in future podcasts about teen drug use. So that's my 6 teen sleep commandments.
Nicely done, particularly without any allusions to Hamilton.
Okay, we should at least mention some rare sleep disorders, such as narcolepsy, when there is disturbed nighttime and daytime sleeping with a propensity to suddenly fall asleep with the usual onset after puberty. This may include something called cataplexy, which is a striking problem of sudden loss of all or some motor function, often caused by strong emotions. It's a great plot filler in cheesy movies and books.
Wait a minute.
Often,
when have you
all of a
seen
sudden,
that?
I have. I don't remember.
What, like
Or
Mannix or
it's
something
an idea
like that?
for other people. All of a sudden they get upset and they faint. Often this is best diagnosed through a sleep study and can sometimes be treated with medications. Also, restless leg syndrome, when one has an irresistible urge to move their body like a tick, most often the legs, at night. This limb jerking at night can run in families, and sometimes stretching before the bed can help a little bit, as well as iron supplementation. But there are newer medications that can really help a lot. This is also known as the Jimmy legs, and Jon Stewart, late of The Daily Show, had this also.
I think you're the only one that knows those Jimmy legs.
I heard it. I think I heard it on the same podcast called The Gist, where they mentioned about Jon Stewart having this syndrome. Sometimes this gets undiagnosed restless leg for years until they share a bed with somebody and literally bruise their partners with kicking, which reminded me of Muhammad Ali versus Inoki fight in the 70s. Does that ring a bell?
Not ringing a bell. What happened?
Can't believe you don't remember that.
Ah.
So they had this big pay-per-view fight where he fought like the best kickboxer in the world, and the kickboxer immediately just got on the ground and just kept kicking Ali's legs. It was the most boring fight in the history. Now, I don't watch fighting anymore. It was the most boring spectacle in history. And Ali had to be hospitalized afterward for thrombophlebitis on both legs from chronic kicks to his
Probably
legs.
not a high point in
Maybe
Muhammad
2 people listening
Ali's,
to this remember that.
rest in peace.
There's also the related periodic limb movement disorder, when you get kind of a fuller myoclonus of the leg. Now, another sleep issue we kind of touched on before is snoring, which is not rare in kids. And if there's true obstructive sleep apnea with pauses in breathing and restless sleep and often enlarged tonsils, then a tonsillectomy and adenoidectomy, or TNA by an ENT, can really be curative. This TNA also may cure other things like periodic fever syndromes and something called FAPA, which we definitely will cover another day.
What do you consider to be apneic, an apneic period that's concerning? Like how many seconds?
You know, I know that I remember from training it was, they said up to 15 seconds. 15 seconds is a long time to wait.
Yeah, I think I've read a few places 8 seconds. Although I think it's fascinating that the monitors that are used on the preemies, if they come home, are set not to go off until 20 seconds go by.
The best thing about those monitors is that we hardly ever use them anymore.
Indeed. But still, I mean, I think it's, okay,
awful.
if 20 seconds is an astoundingly long time. I mean, especially when a parent says like, oh yeah, he holds his breath when he's sleeping. It's got to be at least 20 or 30 seconds. And then you say, okay, you mean like this?
1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, and it's like 3 seconds.
No, not that long. and it's kind of a relative experience for them, and kind of puts things in perspective a little bit. But yeah, I learned 8 seconds. We're gonna have to have an ENT on here.
Yeah, we will. I got one in mind. He's good. He's funny. Cool. And so, lastly, my favorite rare sleep syndrome is the Mike Birbiglia syndrome, otherwise known as the rapid eye movement behavior disorder, where you physically act out your dreams. Obviously, usually in REM sleep, you are paralyzed, but in this disorder, you physically act them out, often with dangerous, but hopefully mostly humorous consequences. And whenever I stay in a La Quinta hotel, I always now go on the lower floors.
Nice.
So after the break, some final thoughts on insomnia and anxiety with sleep. Is grandma really right that if you're lying in the bed, awake, your body is still getting some rest even if you don't fall asleep?
Okay, well, as promised, we have a few Delaware tidbits for our listeners. Remember, we love Delaware. December 7th, 1787, a day which will live in infamy. Delaware is the first state to ratify the Constitution. We are the first state.
Yes, we are, but I sometimes think we were first because the Delaware reps wanted to get that vote in quickly before the other 12 colonies said, wait a minute, Delaware shouldn't be a state. They're tiny. They're just hanging off Pennsylvania and Maryland. That's crazy.
We're legit. And
that's
we're first.
Why we're number one.
Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, as the states surrounding us know, we have no sales tax. And Delaware is only one of 4 states with this phenomenon.
Then there is something that I like to call the Delaware Pause. Now, Joe Biden has ruined this a little bit, but basically this is a well-known but little talked about phenomenon that all Delawareans experience as they go out in the world. Whenever Delawareans meet new people from around the country or abroad, especially when everyone introduces themselves in groups, there's always some kind of response of knowing something about each person's hometown state, whether it's a sports team, a specific food, a landmark. But when someone says they're from Delaware, there's this long, uncomfortable pause. Occasionally, someone mentions the Route 95 toll booth. Have you had that happen to you?
Oh, yes. Many a time.
Oh, Delaware. And, they're thinking, like, is it a state? Is it a county? Is it a city? Where is it? So,
is that just above Georgia?
Is it the South? And we'll end this little Delaware segment with a classic corny Delaware joke. So, Matt, what did Della wear?
I don't know, Rob.
That's not what the script said. You're supposed to say her New Jersey.
I've got a better one than that. When I was growing up, here was the one. You have to say it kind of slowly so people understand it. If Mrs. Ippy lent Miss Zori her New Jersey, what would Della wear? And the answer is Idaho, Alaska. That was from like the joke book of 3rd grade or something like that when I was in school.
And as you recall, in school in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. All right, we'll be right back. We're back, and we're going to end this last sleep-related podcast talking about insomnia, and mostly teen insomnia. Of course, a good physical exam and a complete sleep history is always a must. And with insomnia, you may want to screen for thyroid issues and anemia. And that is a perfect opportunity in teens to also check their total cholesterol, HDL, and per the new guidelines, perhaps even getting an HIV test. We've already covered some causes of primary insomnia like obstructive sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, but much more common is secondary insomnia, which could be from medications, poor sleep hygiene, blue light from screens, and especially depression and anxiety. Now, besides that restless leg syndrome, another interesting fact, Jon Stewart also had severe insomnia that was cured immediately when he retired from The Daily Show, at least, again, according to the gist. So when I heard about that, I finally forgave him for retiring when he did. I do quote Grandma about if you're laying there, you're still getting rest. But having battled insomnia as an adult myself, I know that's of little solace when you're staring at the ceiling for hours. But things like the mindfulness app and meditating that we talked about in previous episodes are good to reinforce that no matter if you get any sleep or not, you will survive. You'll get up in the morning, you'll get through your day, and sometimes that helps because part of the problem is anxiety about the anxiety of not falling asleep.
And just as we discussed with one of our initial episodes in terms of setting the environment, we had discussed setting the environment for infants and toddlers so that they don't develop the wrong sleep associations. Environment really plays a huge role in terms of sleep, to the point where oftentimes I'll recommend utilizing some tools that are easily available and are not expensive at all in terms of helping somebody to really focus on their sleep. So Rob, once again, had mentioned there are multiple apps that can help with this. My personal favorite is Calm. It's an amazing app and can definitely be helpful in terms of settling one's mind. But I'll also recommend earplugs, which, by the way, most people don't seem to use the correct way. It's kind of like an inhaler. You really have to show somebody how to use earplugs the right way. And sleep masks, which I have a wonderful one that I picked up at one of our discount stores for, I don't know, $6. These things definitely can affect blocking out light, which is so key. Your entire body, including your skin, can absorb that blue light, or in fact any light that triggers a lack of a melatonin response, and all kinds of other kind of sundry things that happen with the pineal gland that can interrupt sleep. So these things are important. A quiet, dark, temperate environment. People will talk, and Ariana Huffington had made a big point of a lot of these issues in her book, The Sleep Revolution. Really kind of very thoroughly goes through a lot of things that can help with sleep, and this has now been reprinted in an awful lot of sleep resources as well.
We've actually never talked about that. I love sleep masks, and I have my travel sleep mask and my home sleep mask, and it'd be hard for me to get to sleep now without wearing a sleep mask. Once you get used to that feeling of something over you, but it's so low tech. Yeah. You order it, and $5, you get a silky, nice one. And if it doesn't work, but I do try to tell, especially the teens,
better than Crocs.
And
it's a fantastic experience.
But the question is, do you get colors to match your Crocs? Like you have bright
Actually,
red ones.
It is red. Yeah,
yeah, you do.
It's red. I've got a red thing.
We'll try to get a picture of Matt sleeping in his red mask and Crocs.
You bet.
For the website. Again, things like the sleep masks and meditation and calm apps and having a good environment, keeping the temperature a little bit lower, good sleep hygiene, following the sleep commandments, all those, getting rid of bright light helps. But since these anxiety issues are so common that sometimes you got to go a little bit further, and some teens will be helped by cognitive behavioral therapy about the ability to calm themselves to get to sleep. And sometimes I'll even refer them to that at the same time I'm doing a medical workup. Because any way you slice it, they're still anxious about falling asleep, even if there's other reasons for it.
Sleep is just not respected in our society the way it needs to be. And really not enough time is spent. And I will openly admit to the fact that I do not spend the amount of time I should spend with my patients discussing sleep. It's presumably at least a third of our lives. And so focusing on it a little bit more is one of my goals over the next year or two as I discuss things with my patients and their parents.
Yes, I'm going to end this talking about a controversial area, which is medications for sleep in pediatrics. It's a big question, and there's a lot of different information about it, but there's no studies on any of these, and so it's scary. Melatonin, Benadryl, the favorite of college kids, which is NyQuil. Dr. Judith Owens recently weighed in about this, again, that there's little data on melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone, and the long-term effects of using this hormone in kids is not known. Plus, melatonin is regulated as a dietary supplement, which at another time we'll talk about the disaster of the lack of regulation on dietary supplements, but you don't even know what you're getting buying melatonin off the shelf. So Matt, do you sometimes use melatonin?
I do, and I've had some decent success with it. I've had just a handful of kids report headache with it, which I'm always a little bit dubious of attributing to the melatonin necessarily, although it is, from what I understand, a known side effect. Oftentimes these are kids who are not sleeping well to start with, so it's hard to say from whence that headache came. But yeah, I will recommend melatonin, not routinely, but after some thought. I will also openly admit to the fact that I will, on rare and appropriate, I think, occasions, use an antihistamine to help a child to get to sleep, both playing on its sleep induction but also on its anxiolytic effects. So something along the lines of hydroxyzine, which I will use oftentimes with a very anxious teenager who's just perseverating for hours at nighttime and not being able to fall asleep. Oftentimes I'll incorporate that as a short-term, hopefully, solution as we're thinking about other aspects of their care, like counseling or an SSRI.
I agree. And certainly if you're going to use an antihistamine, I'd use the hydroxyzine before I'd use Benadryl. Mm-hmm. Although I certainly have patients who end up on their own using Benadryl, and I just don't want that to be long-term. Getting back to the melatonin, I also will use it on occasion. And then the question comes up, what dose? There's really not much out there. And like the littler kids, 1, 2, 3 milligrams. Older kids I've read don't go above 6. I have college kids coming in who've been on their own just taking 10. And it's working, although it may not be 10. It may be more, it may be less, because again, it's totally not regulated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there really hasn't been any decent study that at least I'm aware of, I don't know about you, Rob, but that has indicated what is a safe dose and what is a good ballpark to be starting with in various age groups. Is this age dependent in terms of its dosing? Is it weight dependent? I'm not sure, but we just kind of take an educated guess and know about where we want to go. I usually don't go over 8, but other people I have seen go significantly higher.
And then getting back to, even then, what are the long-term effects?
Right.
And it is something that in the community, it's easy to say, don't ever do that. But when you're trying to help the family and you try something, and that's what Dr. Judith Owen says, most of the kids she ends up seeing have already tried it. One thing I've never done, and don't look to do this in the future, is I've never used the prescription sleep medications like Ambien for my pediatric patients. I worry about that and dependency. I also worry about, reports about having amnesia with taking it. How about you?
No, if I have, I think it was only ever once for a colleague's patient in their absence. But I have, however, and again, I think I can count on one hand how many times I've done this, I have used clonidine to help with sleep when other things have failed. When things like, sleep environment and cognitive behavioral therapy and even in a trial of hydroxyzine or melatonin, there are just some kids that are so desperate for sleep. They and their parents are struggling with this mightily, and I will very carefully and very methodically start them on some clonidine. Oftentimes, these are kids who also do express a lot of anxiety. So although it's not my main choice for anxiolytic therapy, it can be helpful in that sense too. As long as we're careful with the blood pressure, I find it to be a nice kind of last tool in the toolbox when it pertains to sleep.
I have not started it de novo. I've taken over some kids who've transferred and I've continued it. For me, I guess I haven't gotten to that level of comfort. So if it's going to be thought of, I'd rather let the psychiatrist do it, except as we all know, it's hard to find a pediatric psychiatrist, which is another whole story.
Right.
They're worth their weight in gold. I also have kids who end up usually with a psychiatrist on the clonidine because they can't sleep because of their daytime meds, like ADD meds. And as much as you could sit there and say that's awful, you should never give a medication for a side effect of another medication, for some kids, and some of these kids have developmental issues, autism and such, it is the only way to get a balance. And so, again, I like to partner with a good pediatric psychiatrist if possible.
Right. Some of our psychiatry colleagues have, although they can't see the children, availed themselves to us in terms of at least being able to help us manage cases and giving us advice. And one of the best pieces of advice I'd gotten from one of our psychiatric colleagues in the community here in Delaware was the use of trazodone, especially in congruence with using an SSRI in somebody who is already manifesting either anxiety or depression. And trazodone is a nice synergistic med that one can use along with an SSRI. There's no contraindication, at least that I'm aware of, to using them both. And it can be very, very helpful for sleep. So it's given QHS. The dosing, I believe, is anywhere from 25 to 100 milligrams. I've had some dramatically impressive results with that as it pertains to some of my older, particularly teenage patients.
I have not done that, but after the show, I need to pick your brain about that. So thank you. So that's it for sleep. Obviously, this is an extremely broad topic that we could not touch on everything in 3 episodes, but hopefully we illuminated some pediatric sleep issues, and maybe within there was a few pediatric sleep pearls that you might even be able to use with your family or with your patients. Check out podcastpediatricians.com. We'll have our more detailed show notes and a bibliography of some of the sources that we used for these podcasts. And again, we welcome your feedback and suggestions and your pearls and faux pas.
And faux pas. We've got a bunch in our pocket that we're going to be sharing
and
with you
every
as
day
future
we're making
episodes.
new ones.
Stay tuned for our next podcast. Finally, our first rant. And we're researching our next big podcast pediatrician topic.
Poop, potty training, and constipation. I love constipation.
That says a lot about you, man. You are weird.
I guess I am. So, all right. So, say goodnight, Gracie. Say goodnight, Matt.
Good night, Matt.
Good night, Rob.
Good night, Moon.
Podcast Pediatricians Productions. All rights reserved.